Picture a boy, wide-eyed, sitting in front of the TV. Disney movies flicker across the screen. Princes kneel, princesses smile, fireworks explode, and the story always ends the same, happily ever after. Now imagine that boy growing into a man. The stories change: romantic comedies, Instagram proposals, lavish weddings trending on TikTok, but the message doesn't. Society whispers the same line over and over again. Find your soulmate. Tie the knot. Your life will be complete. But what if this promise, the one we've been told since childhood, isn't just misleading, but a trap? Arthur Schopenhauer thought so. A man infamous for stripping illusions bare, Schopenhauer didn't just doubt love, he dissected it. He saw through the fireworks, the vows, the rings, the smiling family photos. To him, marriage wasn't the golden crown of life. It was a cage, a deal signed under the influence of nature's cruelest trick: biology. Society tells you marriage is freedom. Schopenhauer saw it as chains. He compared it to walking into a prison cell and locking the door from the inside. At first, you're intoxicated by emotion, by attraction, by hormones that flood your body like fireworks in the night sky. But once the chemicals fade, you're left with reality, a contract, a duty, a lifetime tether. And here's the cruel irony. For centuries, people believed marriage was a path to happiness, but Schopenhauer flipped the script. Marriage isn't about happiness, it's about survival of the species. Love, he argued, isn't divine. It's DNA hijacking your brain, tricking you into reproducing, convincing you that what you feel is forever. But it isn't. It's temporary, a state of chemical hypnosis. Think about it. Look at the numbers. Half of marriages end in divorce. That's not opinion, that's fact. And of those who don't divorce, how many are actually thriving? How many couples sit across from each other at dinner, scrolling their phones, not speaking, not laughing, not even looking up? How many smile in public while living in quiet desperation behind closed doors? Schopenhauer predicted this centuries ago. He saw the mismatch: the biological drive for attraction, temporary by design, colliding with the social and legal institution of marriage, permanent by demand. It's like signing a lifetime contract at the gym because you felt good after your first workout. The rush fades, the endorphins wear off. But you're still locked in, paying the price day after day. And that price? It isn't just financial, it's your freedom, your time, your ability to choose spontaneously, your identity. Slowly, marriage erodes the very qualities that once made you vibrant. Your independence turns into codependence, your mystery into routine, your passion into obligation. Most people don't see it coming, because when you're in love, your brain isn't yours. Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, these chemicals flood your mind like a drug, overriding logic. Red flags? Ignored. Differences? Minimized. Future consequences? Forgotten. You feel certain, when in reality, your brain is just hijacked. And then inevitably the high fades, the hormones reset, the magic dissolves. You wake up next to someone who may no longer feel like the person you once knew. And suddenly, you realize that what you thought was eternal passion was just biology's trick to keep humanity going. Schopenhauer didn't romanticize this. He called it for what it was: the will to live manipulating you for the species' benefit. Your personal happiness? Irrelevant. What matters to nature is reproduction. That's it. But here's where it gets darker. Once the spell wears off, marriage doesn't just fail to deliver happiness, it actively destroys it. Because now, you're not just two people exploring life together, you're two people bound by law, by duty, by expectation. Every choice becomes a negotiation, every dream a compromise, every moment of silence a reminder that you are no longer free to live purely as yourself. Schopenhauer wasn't bitter, he was honest. He saw that marriage forces human beings to trade authenticity for conformity, freedom for security, passion for predictability. And in his eyes, that was too high a price. So, before we move further, ask yourself, if half of marriages collapse, and many of the rest limp on as quiet compromises, is it really the fairy tale we were promised? Or is it society's most successful illusion, one so powerful that entire generations walk willingly into the same trap, generation after generation? The second chapter, the silent erosion. Imagine this. You wake up one morning, years after the wedding day that once felt like the peak of your life. The photos still hang on the wall, smiling faces frozen in time. But the room feels colder now, not because of the weather, but because of something subtler, heavier. The laughter that once filled the air has thinned into silence. Conversations that used to run until dawn have shrunk into small talk about bills, schedules, children, groceries. And somewhere along the way, without you noticing, the spark that once felt eternal slipped quietly out the back door. Schopenhauer would say, this is inevitable. Because what you fell in love with wasn't the real person, not fully. It was a projection, magnified and distorted by chemistry. Your brain painted them as perfect, as if the universe had designed them just for you. But biology doesn't care about accuracy. It only cares about attraction strong enough to keep you together until reproduction has done its job. And then, the mask falls. The illusion breaks. You find yourself face to face with a stranger, their habits, their values, their flaws, things you never saw or refused to see in the haze of infatuation. This is where marriage often shifts from passion to tolerance. At best, you coexist. At worst, you resent. And it's not because either of you is bad. It's because the foundation itself, romantic love as permanence, is built on quicksand. Think of how subtle the erosion is. At first, compromise feels noble. You give up a hobby to spend more time together. You agree to watch their favorite shows. You adjust your routines, your social life, your weekends. These are small sacrifices, and they feel like love, but slowly they stack up. One compromise here, another there, and before long, you don't recognize the person in the mirror. Your independence, reframed as selfishness, your need for space, misinterpreted as rejection, your ambition, labeled as neglect, and so you shrink yourself to keep the peace. You silence parts of who you are just to maintain harmony. Until one day, you realize you've become half a person trying to be part of a whole. Schopenhauer called this psychological suicide, because what makes us truly alive, our freedom, our solitude, our authenticity, gets slowly dismantled inside the machinery of marriage. And here's the paradox. Society praises this erosion. It's disguised as maturity. When passion fades, they call it stability. When excitement dies, they call it commitment. When you stop pursuing your own dreams, they call it sacrifice. But behind these words is something more insidious, the quiet burial of individuality. Look closely at married couples in public. How many are really present with each other? How many are scrolling on their phones, eating in silence, existing side by side rather than together? That emptiness is what Schopenhauer foresaw. Two people locked in by law, long after the love that united them has dissolved. But here's the cruelest part. Marriage doesn't just erode passion, it erodes possibility. The artist sets aside his canvas because his partner needs attention. The entrepreneur abandons risk because the household demands security. The dreamer forgets to dream, too tired from managing another's moods and needs, not out of malice, but out of the slow, suffocating weight of shared obligation. Schopenhauer argued that genius requires solitude, not loneliness, but freedom. The kind of space where your mind can wander without interruption, where your time belongs only to you. But marriage demands the opposite: constant consultation, perpetual compromise, endless consideration. And in that endless negotiation, spontaneity dies. The very energy that made you vibrant, creative, magnetic dissolves into routine. It's not dramatic, it's not explosive, it's worse, it's gradual, a death by 1,000 small cuts. You don't even notice it happening until one day you ask yourself, when was the last time I made a decision without factoring in someone else's opinion? This is what makes Schopenhauer's critique so haunting. He wasn't warning about obvious suffering, the kind you see in arguments or affairs. He was warning about the quiet kind, the kind that creeps into your soul slowly, invisibly, until you can't remember what freedom felt like. And so, he declared, a man can be himself only so long as he is alone. Not because connection is worthless, but because constant connection robs you of the most essential thing, yourself. But here's the twist most people miss. Solitude isn't loneliness. Solitude is strength. It's the fertile soil where ideas grow, where creativity sparks, where individuality sharpens. Marriage, Schopenhauer argued, makes solitude a sin. Needing space becomes suspicious. Wanting independence becomes selfish. So, the question is, how much of yourself are you willing to trade? How many of your passions, your curiosities, your potential achievements are you willing to bury in the name of companionship? Because the truth is, love is real, but its permanence is not. The chemicals fade, the masks drop, and what remains is often two people bound by duty, not desire. And the cost of that? It's not just unhappiness, it's the quiet erosion of who you could have been. The third chapter, the price of the chain. Walk into a quiet cafe on a Sunday morning. Notice the difference between the single man in the corner, scribbling into his notebook with unbroken focus, and the couple at the center table, arguing softly over where to spend the afternoon. One moves with clarity, the other negotiates endlessly. This contrast is exactly what Schopenhauer meant when he warned that marriage doesn't just bind your body, it binds your mind. Every decision, once simple, now becomes a negotiation. Where to live, how to spend, what to eat, which friends to see, whether to have children, and if so, how to raise them. Each choice is filtered, delayed, diluted by another's needs, moods, and opinions. And slowly, what once felt like freedom transforms into obligation. Think about your ambitions. As a single person, your time is yours. 4 hours reading, 6 hours creating, 8 hours building something that matters. Your energy belongs only to your growth. But in marriage, time becomes shared time. Energy becomes our energy. Focus becomes compromise. The artist who once painted until dawn now puts away the brush early to keep their partner company. The thinker who once devoured books now closes them because their partner isn't interested. The dreamer who once risked everything now chooses security over vision because a shared life demands safety, not risk. This isn't sabotage. It's simply the gravity of merging two lives. And over time, it bends even the strongest ambitions into smaller, safer shapes. Schopenhauer was blunt. Genius requires selfishness. Not cruelty, but a fierce protection of one's inner life. The courage to say no to distractions. The strength to guard solitude like a treasure. Marriage, by design, dissolves this, because what partnership demands above all else is access. Constant access. Emotional availability. Endless presence. But here's the irony. The very qualities that once made you attractive, your independence, your mysterious aura, your unapologetic passion, become threats inside marriage. At first, they pulled your partner toward you. Later, they create distance. Independence becomes neglect. Passion becomes obsession with other things. Mystery becomes suspicion. In trying to protect the relationship, you slowly erase the parts of yourself that made it thrive in the first place. And this isn't just philosophy, it's psychology. Modern studies confirm what Schopenhauer predicted. Married people, on average, report more stress, more anxiety, more depression, and less sleep than their single counterparts. They carry not only their own emotional weight, but also their partner's. Their bad day becomes your problem. Their insecurities become your responsibility. Their happiness becomes your job. It's a treadmill you can never escape, because happiness cannot be outsourced. You cannot make someone else whole, no matter how hard you try. But marriage insists that you must. And so begins the endless cycle of guilt, blame, and disappointment. This is what Schopenhauer likened to the hedgehog's dilemma. Two hedgehogs huddle close to share warmth, but inevitably prick each other with their quills. They move apart to avoid pain, but then grow cold. They spend their lives in this dance of intimacy and distance, never quite finding balance. That's marriage in a nutshell. Too close, and you suffocate each other. Too far, and you drift into loneliness. Society tells you this is love, but Schopenhauer saw it as nature's cruel joke, trying to solve a biological impulse with a social contract. And time only deepens the irony. The quirks that once made your partner adorable become irritants. The unpredictability that once excited you becomes instability. The routine you once craved for safety becomes monotony. Passion dissolves into predictability. Excitement turns into obligation. But instead of admitting this, society rebrands it. The death of passion, they call it maturity. The loss of excitement, they call it stability. The erosion of joy, they call it commitment. Schopenhauer ripped the mask off. He argued that most people don't stay together because of love. They stay because of fear. Fear of starting over, fear of loneliness, fear of social judgment. And so many endure what he called legalized misery, hiding their quiet suffering behind family photos and anniversary posts. But the cost is enormous. Not just the cost of happiness, but the cost of potential. Because when you trade solitude for companionship, you also trade growth for maintenance. The energy that could have gone into building something extraordinary is diverted into sustaining something ordinary. History's greatest minds knew this. Nietzsche, Kant, Newton, Tesla, Beethoven. Many chose solitude over marriage, not because they hated love, but because they knew what it would cost them. Their genius, their focus, their freedom. And freedom is the hidden currency here. Freedom to think deeply, freedom to risk boldly, freedom to live without compromise. Marriage, by design, chips away at it until you no longer remember what it felt like to be truly untethered. So, here's the question no one dares to ask. Is companionship worth the silent erosion of possibility? Is the comfort of shared life worth the slow death of your individual flame? Schopenhauer didn't think so. For him, solitude wasn't loneliness, it was liberation. It was where a person could sharpen their mind like a blade, unclouded by another's demands. It was where true creativity, clarity, and authenticity could thrive. And maybe that's the bitter truth we avoid. That love, as we define it, often asks for too much. That marriage, as we practice it, takes more than it gives. That in seeking to build a life with someone else, we often abandon the very life we were meant to live. The fourth chapter. The freedom few dare to claim. Stand still for a moment and listen not to the noise of the world, but to the silence within yourself. That silence is where Schopenhauer believed truth lives. Not in the chatter of social expectations, not in the applause of family and friends at your wedding, but in the quiet recognition that you, alone, are already complete. Yet society makes solitude look like failure. If you're unmarried by a certain age, they ask, what's wrong with you? If you choose freedom over partnership, they label you selfish, cold, incomplete. But what if the opposite is true? What if solitude isn't emptiness, but wholeness? What if freedom isn't loneliness, but authenticity? What if walking alone is not a curse, but the ultimate strength? Schopenhauer lived this truth. While his contemporaries were tangled in marriages, obligations, and domestic dramas, he wrote. He thought. He created. His solitude wasn't isolation, it was fuel. The very reason his philosophy still resonates centuries later is because he chose freedom over conformity. And this is the lesson we avoid. Marriage doesn't just cost you happiness, it costs you presence. It pulls you out of the now. Instead of living fully in this moment, you are coordinating futures and repairing pasts, weaving two lives into one fragile narrative. But in solitude, the present becomes vivid. The silence sharpens. Your desires, unfiltered by compromise, finally speak clearly. Ask yourself, how many people know what they actually want? Not what their partner wants, not what society expects, but what they truly, deeply desire. Marriage makes this question harder because life becomes a negotiation. But solitude gives you the clarity to answer it without fear. And this is where Schopenhauer's so-called pessimism becomes liberation. He wasn't telling you not to love. He was telling you not to confuse love with permanence. Love, he argued, is a gift of the moment, not a lifelong contract. It is an experience, not an obligation. Think of love like a sunset. You don't demand it last forever. You don't try to trap the light and hold it in a box. You experience it fully while it's there, breathe it in, marvel at it, and then let it pass, knowing another moment will come. But marriage? Marriage is trying to capture that sunset, nail it to the wall, and demand it shine every day for the rest of your life. Impossible. And here lies the freedom most never claim. The freedom to stop grasping, to stop forcing impermanence into permanence, to stop demanding that another human being complete you when you were never incomplete to begin with. Schopenhauer called this the cessation of willing the moment you stop chasing illusions and start recognizing the peace that exists when desire falls silent. It isn't bitterness, it isn't cynicism, it's clarity. Imagine living life no longer as a seeker of validation, but as a creator of meaning. Imagine waking up each day with your energy undiluted, your focus intact, your soul unchained. That is what solitude offers the chance to live authentically, to give the world your truest self. Because here's the paradox: the more complete you become alone, the more capable you are of experiencing love freely, without need, without fear, without chains. Only two whole people can share love without trying to consume each other, and the wholeness required can only be forged in solitude. So maybe the real question isn't, when will I get married, but why would I? Why would you trade freedom for conformity? Why would you exchange authenticity for approval? Why would you sacrifice the possibility of your fullest life for the comfort of the familiar? The smartest thing you can do isn't to chase someone who completes you. That's the stupidest thing. The smartest thing is to realize completion was an illusion all along. That what you thought you lacked was never missing, it was buried beneath expectations, noise, and illusions. Look back at history. Tesla, Newton, Beethoven, Nietzsche, men who gave the world timeless contributions, not because they were trapped in compromise, but because they walked alone. Their solitude wasn't a weakness, it was the soil where greatness bloomed. And perhaps that's the deeper truth Schopenhauer leaves us with. The man who walks alone walks faster, freer, and truer. So, ask yourself now, do you want a life of negotiated compromises or a life of unfiltered authenticity? Do you want to spend your days managing another's moods or mastering your own mind? Do you want to gamble your freedom on society's illusion of permanence or claim it back and live the life that was always yours to begin with? The answer doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need a wedding, a crowd, or approval. It needs only one thing: the courage to walk alone. And in that choice, in that silence, you may discover something far greater than happily ever after. You may discover freedom.